Thank you for that and welcome back. So, the next slide is just about collaboration. I talked about collaboration. So what the transformation unit does is that we're a very small team, but how we manage ourselves and manage our resources, we have service level agreements with various entities, with various expertise, and that's how we make sure that we achieve what we need to achieve on a daily basis. And by doing that, we found that it's better to manage the project from that perspective, because you can manage the deliverables and the deadline dates, and those that know me know how I am about deadlines. And it ensures that we can stretch our funding, we can elaborate, we can also look at economies of scale when it comes to production. We increase our revenue and profitability, market access, where I would take about 5 brands. If I partner, I can take 14 brands. We just were at Win Expo New York, and we were the biggest footprint of any other country in New York as black-owned brands. And then obviously with the strengthening of partnerships with government and with industry, it means that stakeholders, we involve all stakeholders from an early stage of the initiative, and that we've got that pre and post support where it is required. You say this is working. Oops. Other way around, yeah. There we go. So this is just, I'm not going to go into the finer detail of this, but this is just what we achieve with greater partnerships. So on corporate social investment, these are all the partners, and this is all the deliverables that we could achieve in a 4-year levy cycle. So you can see with partnerships, everything just gets in place and it's in place. This is the technical partnership that we've got with Vinpro. We've got a strong SLA with Vinpro. And as I said, Wine MS, we also work very closely with the Department of Agriculture, Western Cape, and the National Department of Agriculture. And this is the technical, on the technical side, the viticultural, the farming side of what we can achieve in terms of new farms being assisted, hectarage, tonnage, and a bigger footprint. So I just wanted to stand a little bit on this slide, and our first speaker really touched on this, so I'm not going to be too long on this, but I think the key objective is when we talk about how do we make things possible, and it is that for all stakeholders, there's strategies to be aligned with each other. So, you know, we've got the national strategy from government that says that how are we going to transform the country. Then we've got a provincial strategy to say that how will provincial government implement that. We've got municipality policies, and then we've also got industry policies and strategies. And the only thing that I'm saying is that when we align all strategies, it means that we support, with the beneficiaries that we support, we all move in the same direction. And then if we look at 4 or 5 years, we can at least have 10 or 20 case studies where we say that with that alignment in all the resources, whether or not it's people, funding, technical support, that everything is aligned towards a common end goal, and that we can all share in those achievements. And then obviously also funding alignment, because we know that there's a lot of funding opportunities, and most of the funding opportunities is really driven by commercial funding criteria. We have to look at funding instruments. That is really, one of the colleagues said that patient funding, you know, holiday breaks when it comes to payment periods paying back. So we do require more of a stronger development fund to assist our beneficiaries and our farmers on the ground. Available land and water rights, research and innovation needs to be aligned of where the needs are, and not in the sense of where the big commercial entities requires it to be. I think our emerging farmers are in desperate need of that innovation and research. And what is that exactly? We need to do a needs analysis to say what on the ground do they need in terms of research and innovation. Then we talked about capacity building and people development. I must comment Gerard Martin and the Wine Tech team, learner management. I'll go into the little bit of detail about that. But it's also, as the wine industry, we have done a needs analysis assessment, and we've plotted the entire industry needs in terms of where we need to build capacity. And with that, each worker or employer in the industry, directly or indirectly, can go onto this database, upload the information, and in a specific career opportunities, their future path is actually plotted for them. And then if you're funded by the transformation unit, Your funding for your training models, your courses, workshops, master classes are funded for you, and it is tracked and monitored. And at the end of the day, if you can either become an entrepreneur or you can start being employed by the industry and you are recognized for future career opportunities. So that in itself is a major leap that the industry has done. And Phil talked about the cost of compliance. We talked about VETA. We talked about fair trade. If you're a beneficiary on our program, we fund that with the department, Western Cape Department of Agriculture. So we make sure that our farmers are actually accredited when they need to export, so that that is not a barrier for market access for them. Then on the services side, the technical and both the business side, we've got a strong SLA with Vinpro. Vinpro represents most of the big producers in the industry, but that SLA comes with a very strong viticultural or knowledgeable soil science service that our farmers can access, and most of the time the hours are given free to them. So viticulturals will come in and you will spend a certain amount of time on a weekly basis providing advice, consultancy. And if it comes that we need to explore or we need to develop a set of land on that farm, then we do soil analysis, we see that the soil is fertile. We also look at what are the ideal cultivars to plant on that soils in their terroir. I hope it's not my time. I've been deprived of time. Then market access opportunities, we look at the markets that is really beneficial for our brand owners, and not just go into the generic markets that everybody goes into, but that there's a real need for black-owned brands specifically to enter the market. And then obviously key important is that we measure the impact and the outputs of all the funding investment that's been given over a period of time. I think that the time where money has just been given is gone. We need to show impact to government, but also to ourselves of what are we doing with the funding. And if we do all this in alignment, it will obviously ensure that the bottom, where it comes to the targets and the measurables, are achieved. I'll tell you a little bit more about our measurements. Gerard is going to focus on wine tech later on, so I'm not going to focus on that too much, and then the professional body that we've established. Then I just want to, this is a case study. So I talk about the Northern Cape small growers very frequently, and Phil, my colleague, has talked about the West Coast small growers. But what we've done is that these small growers in the Western Cape, they're about 6. They own about 2 to 3 hectares of land. So very small properties. They will never become these big commercial entity. But what we've done for them is that we've supported them with implements in order to ensure that they don't need to rent out and pay extra expenses. But we've also diversified the income stream. So we've created, they supply wine and raisins at the moment. In the last 2 months, we've been very fortunate to get a donation of beehives to them from a US donor. And now they are able to be bee farmers as well, generating that additional income stream. And the funder that funded the beehives will take their produce back and buy it back from them. So that is an immediate income stream into the operations. Then just a minute, you will taste the Wine Ark wines today. The Wine Ark really is an initiative in Stellenbosch in the Western Cape, and it's a partnership agreement between the ARC, the Western Cape Department of Agriculture, and then the Transformation Unit. So we all funded this initiative, and it's basically a market access initiative for black-owned brands to enter the market. I talked about a strong tourism diversified income. So this is where we would be able to get that diversified income for the brands at the facility. There is various phases to the project. The first phase was really to play in tourism and to sell the wines. The second phase is to develop the production facility so that they can co-share, almost like a commune type of environment. You co-share the resources, and at the end of the day, they all get sustainable and developed. And then the third phase is to start developing the land. The property is on a 250-hectare prime soil, of which 50 hectares planted. So the idea is to develop the space so that the brands can benefit and the farmers can benefit from a communal space and don't need to wait for land to be procured or acquired or given. This is me. If you want to have more information, we have got an exhibition stand in the hall at the across at the restaurant. There's also some lovely wines to taste, and please come and have a conversation to find out more about what to do.
Another hand of applause. I want to apologize to the audience who are attending virtually that we were offline due to load shedding for about 10 minutes. And welcome back. You are reminded again to put your questions and comments on the chat box. Our next speaker is Michael Wellington from Digital Earth Africa.
Thank you very much, Professor. My name is Michael Wellington from Digital Earth Africa. I'm Australian, so you may wonder why I work on such a thing called Digital Earth Africa, but I'm fortunate to be part of a global team and a small subgroup from Geoscience Australia, an Australian government agency where Digital Earth Africa was initiated. And the hosting of Digital Earth Africa has since transitioned over here to Africa. So our head offices are here in Pretoria, and our data is hosted by Amazon Web Services in Cape Town. We also enjoy a global team of scientists, including Dr. Lisa Rebello, who's here with us this week, although is normally based in Sri Lanka. So what is Digital Earth Africa? And what do we do? If we could move to the next slide. Thank you. We are a program of activities that aims to encompass the entire value chain of innovation related to Earth observation and remote sensing data that begins as satellites. So the motto that we have is from space to village, although in this context and this conference we could perhaps say we operate from space to field, but we think it's not quite good enough just to have the open source and the open data that people can operate, which are our continental scale operational services. We need to provide information, training, capacity building and other activities which enable users to identify, first of all, where they might benefit from the use of Earth observation data, and then how they might go about engaging with Earth observation data and analyses to assist in their user-specific applications. So to achieve that, we have a series of Jupyter notebooks for the computer geeks like me. That's written in the Python programming language, but there's a whole lot of markdown and notation associated with that programming language, so users are understanding what the code is asking the data to do, and they're understanding the application of the outputs. So, for instance, there in the top right, you can see the expansion of cropland in North Africa in Egypt, and that's all based on a Jupyter notebook which users can easily access. They can get that Landsat data for over 30 years of satellite images. They can understand how it applies to that particular scene in Egypt, and then they can run that analysis again for an area of interest in their local area or their particular country. All of those Jupyter notebooks are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, which are a fundamental aspect and principle of how we operate. And then as we move along that spectrum from space to village or space to field, we also, at the village or the field end of the spectrum, conduct product co-design with our end users, which include government agencies across Africa and farmers themselves. And we also conduct training activities and networking, so there's weekly live sessions online in both French and English, and a range of in-person training and consultations that we conduct across Africa as well. Oh, I've got to go down. Sorry about that. Mixed up my ups and downs. So I'll talk more about a specific project that Digital Earth Africa has been involved in for the past 8 months, and that's the Information for Agriculture, Food and Water Security project. We've been fortunate to conduct that as Digital Earth Africa in collaboration with our friends and partners at Azareka and Cardessa in Southern Africa. That relationship has been really helpful for us. We are an African agency and organisation, but those particular agencies, Azareka and Cardessa, have the in-country connections, particularly with agriculture and food security agencies. So from our perspective, it's linked us with our end users and people on the ground, and from their perspective, it's linked them with the ability to continue to build capacity, particularly in Earth observation, and provide training that they wouldn't otherwise be able to necessarily provide. The aim of the project was to support consultations in country to better understand the needs, opportunities and gaps for Earth observation data. So it was really a capacity needs assessment that Mr. Mamadou referred to in his presentation earlier. And based on those consultations in country, develop a roadmap for our program, Digital Earth Africa, to deliver services tailored to user needs to improve agricultural productivity, water security and build resilience in the food sector. So we've conducted the initial consultations and then further what we've called deep dive consultations, which involved a bit more training and getting boots dirty in terms of data wrangling. And we've done those across 6 countries so far: Botswana, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, South Africa and Uganda. So in the initial consultations, we brought together a whole group of people from agricultural agencies, water management agencies, the water authorities that Dr. Moyo referred to in his presentation, put them in a room, and then we asked them to conduct a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats analysis of Earth observation and a platform like Digital Earth Africa, which was really interesting to see what they thought and perceived Earth observation might be able to provide across Africa. And then we brought them together again in a further deep dive workshop where we actually provided some further training. So they got their fingers dirty in terms of logging into our platform, running a few codes, understanding what Earth observation and remote sensing can provide. And then we sought further feedback about, after they'd experienced that Earth observation and remote sensing and what it can and can't do, what its strengths and limitations are, we got further feedback about what the users felt the opportunities were. So a range of agencies there. That particular picture is from the workshop conducted in Rwanda. We've been very conscious to try and avoid the all-boys choir situation that we had referred to here yesterday. We haven't succeeded with that in every country, admittedly, although I think we might have just got there in Rwanda with that one. So based on the findings of those initial workshops and consultations, we have developed a few ideas about where we might go next with the Digital Earth Africa program. If we could move to the next slide, please. There we go, thank you. So the overall themes that have been, I guess, delivered to us from our workshop participants is that there is a real demand for training among the NGOs and the service organisations in these countries, and that training is a critical part of our co-design process. So with co-design of some of our use cases and Earth observation products, such as a crop map or a coastlines mapping product, or even such a thing as a habitat suitability product for elephants, we are committed to co-design. And what we've noticed is that it's not good enough for us to go to users, ask them what they want, and then for us to go back to our office and work on it and deliver an outcome. And on the other hand, it's not good enough for us to go to the users, provide training in 1 or 2 instances and expect them to deliver it. It has to be a two-way conversation, and it has to be circular along the way. So initially we get an understanding of a user need. We then provide training related to that need. The user develops a better understanding of what Earth observation can and can't do, because they generally come with a rather limited understanding of that. And we have this kind of circular uplifting process with our co-design along the way. The second piece of feedback that we've got from the workshops is that there is a genuine interest in connecting to smallholder farmers in particular with this technology, but I think that's something that we need to think very carefully and keep talking about how that actually happens. I live on a farm myself, and I know that farmers are very busy and they don't, they've got a lot of competing demands and things to do, and they don't necessarily want to be running Python codes on satellite images in their spare time. So I'm not convinced that farmers are our analytical end users, but that doesn't mean that they're not the ultimate beneficiaries of the technology. So how they interact with our technology, I think, is something that we need to consider deeply and keep talking about. It might be through a different interface, so it might be through a point-and-click software interface, something that's very quick and easy to use. And I think regardless of the interface, we will need, as a platform, Digital Earth Africa support from the private sector. And I was interested in Mr. Mamadou's comments earlier about the decline of extension services in some countries. I think that will be the conduit for us in some countries, but in other countries we'll rely on the private sector to integrate and innovate alongside the smallholder farmers. The third piece of information that we've received from the workshop is that our products, our applications and our analyses need to provide tangible agricultural information. So things like crop type maps, yield estimates, which are very tangible for people but are difficult for us to do technically, and water use requirements. So something that farmers can relate to essentially. So an example of that that we've been working on over the past 18 months are customizable crop type workflows. This particular example here is from Zambia, where we started. So first of all, we recognise that agriculture is quite heterogeneous, as we've heard from a number of speakers, and complex in Africa. In a place like Zambia, there are large broadacre cropping areas, but equally there are small-scale irrigated areas in wetlands where people are growing a range of different crops in the same place, which makes crop type mapping from satellites quite difficult. So there has to be a conversation with the user about what they're actually wanting from the crop type mapping. We then run some analyses related to the field data collection and sampling that's required before we even begin to try and develop a crop type map. So the users go out, they figure out who's going into the field to collect that data. There's further conversations along the way. We keep them informed about our technical approach related to data preparation, feature extraction and feature exploration. And then there's some complex things that happen with machine learning, but again, they're all presented in hopefully a rather accessible and interpretable way for our users, and ultimately we've got something that the user's been involved in along the entire development platform, a crop type map for Zambia, and we're now taking that workflow, adapting it with further users in Rwanda and Mozambique, and supported by the Food and Agriculture Organisation. So, based on the consultations and the workshops that we've been doing, we're looking forward to partnering with more organisations in Africa. I've had some great conversations over the few days so far. The team is here today at the exhibition booth, so please drop by if you're interested in understanding more about our platform. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Ms. Lisa Strubel, is from Grain SA. She's the Operations and Training Manager.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to share some insights from the farmer development side of Grain SA. So just quickly to start off with, let me just get this working. Is it me or you? All right, excellent. So just a little bit of background regarding the Farmer Development Program of Grain SA. We've been up and running since around about 2009. We mainly started with a focus on training, and from there needs just evolved as farmer needs became more clear. So the main aim of the program remains across all the years is to develop capacitated farmers to move towards profitability and sustainability irrespective of the size of that land. So just to give you an idea, we've got just over 9,000 subsistence farmers within our program. Now, as you can see, those numbers are quite high compared to the larger commercial farmers. Now, we'd ideally like to see that scale tipping the other way. We are, however, working hard to move towards that. But also then, in the meantime, we are focusing on improving productivity to achieve commercial yields and to increase efficiency, as mentioned, irrespective of the number of hectares that a farmer might have. So before we move on to the challenges that we're all very aware of that the farmers face, there are also actually quite a few positive aspects of being a smaller scale farmer. So firstly, a farmer, a smaller unit is a little bit more adaptable. It can be changed and adapted quicker. So it's easier to turn a small boat around as opposed to a large ship. So maybe size isn't always the answer. So with very small adaptations in a smaller farming unit, like for example, using the correct type of cultivars, proper spraying program, the correct type of fertilizer, a farmer like that can very easily turn the business around 180 degrees in a season. So secondly, we think smaller farmers are also a bit more open to change quicker than large commercial farmers. They're very adaptable and take on advice and skills transfer very, very easily. So the guys are open to learning. A last thing that is also a positive aspect that we've seen of being a bit smaller, subsistence farmers tend to produce for household food consumption, and if there's extra maize to sell, it creates an income. So in many cases, we see that selling that maize per bag sometimes yields a better income than actually selling it at through a commercial off-taker. Lastly, I think what's important, we must just caution against generalization about any farmer type. So provinces differ, areas differ, farmers and personalities differ. So I think it's important to remember there's not always a one-size-fits-all solution to issues on the ground. Okay, so now when we get to the actual challenges, I don't think our time would allow to go through the whole list, but just to focus on the correct type of inputs and infrastructure. So in many cases, the closest outlets to a subsistence farmer, I'm now focusing on the worst case scenario where you have a subsistence farmer in a rural village quite far away from a town. The places where a farmer can buy his or her inputs, it can be 10 or 20 kilometers away. So if that farmer, for example, only plants 1 or 2 hectares, the supplier is 10 kilometers away, and for example, chemicals is sold in 20-liter drums, and the farmer doesn't have transport. That is a serious problem that people don't always realize regarding access and the size of, in what inputs, the former inputs are presented in. Then when we look at rural markets, in many of the villages close by, there are no local grain buyers or storage facilities for grain. Now, that is also becomes a problem. As a farmer develops and grows, the produce is getting more and more. So it gets more and more difficult to not to get rid, but to sell that product. So the access to selling points is also a challenge that we've come across. All right, then when we look at the potential roles of stakeholders, just focusing on those points that I just mentioned. So suppliers mainly cater, obviously, for the commercial market, selling in bulk. So there is a real low-hanging fruit for government and commodities to start liaising with these agribusinesses and suppliers to firstly get their products in smaller batches, 1 hectare packages, for example, and secondly, also to move selling points closer to where the farmers are situated. There are some input suppliers that are looking at that. They've been looking at local containers where there's a set-off point, for example, maize seed and Roundup. So the success there is immense, but you don't have the scope of products, and obviously also simply not enough of that. Secondly, training, when you look at training skills and mentorship, there's an absolute massive demand in that front. It's crucial, but it is extremely expensive. So we've also seen there's so much work going into this. I mean, we're doing it, other commodity organizations, government, the private sector, but there's a dire need for better alignment. So there's a lot of money going into these initiatives, but it's not aligned. So there's definitely progress that can happen there. Lastly, regarding the selling of grain locally, infrastructure like storage and pickup facilities are needed closer to the local villages. That is almost a no-brainer, where liaising with, again, agribusinesses, grain buyers, and government is very, very high on the list of almost low-hanging fruit. I think many buyers also don't always realize the potential that are in those areas. There is actually potential for buying bulk grain there, just if you have the facility. It's an absolute win-win situation. Right, when we move over to the successes of the Farmer Development Program, I can keep you busy all day with all the things that we're busy with, but I think the most important thing that we've achieved to date, and that is still evolving and that we're working on a daily basis, is to create the structure and pipeline towards commercializing farmers. So the main thing is, we don't need to do everything for a farmer, but you have to put the structure and pipeline there for that person to access and empower themselves. So on the one side, I'm not keeping up with my slides. My slides aren't keeping up with me. So when you look at our program, on the one side, we have the entry level of farmers, or the intake of farmers. So there, the main focus is absolute intensive training and skills transfer. That is the main focus. We achieved that through those actions that I'm not going to go through one by one. On the other hand, once that farmer has proven themselves in the sense of you can see this person is reliable, this person is hardworking, there's room for growth. There's a possibility to be enrolled into input production loan funding project. Now, we've got various projects going in that regard, and this year we're looking funding over just under 80 farmers with production loans, and that is without necessarily owning the land. So I think the partners that we are working with, they understand the need, they understand what the farmers' situation are, and they truly are trying to adapt their processes to support these guys. I see my time is limited. I just quickly want to show you one thing. Just a step back to the subsistence farmers. Grain SA was involved in the Jobs Fund for about 4 years. I just wanted to highlight the impact that training, mentorship, and the correct inputs had in one season. So if you see that first year, 2015-16, that was the first year. With those support systems provided, that average yield of those farmers went from 1.5 tons per hectare to over 4 tons. Just very quickly, on the research side, Grain SA is also involved in research. So there's currently Grain SA and DSI have been working together to make various bursaries available to invest in human capital, but also to address industry challenges. So between 2018 and 2022, a total of 92 bursaries were awarded to various students. Now, this was achieved through a consortium-based partnership, which is crucial. Most of these students are actively involved in research relating to specifically identified research needs from the field, such as maize planting dates, crop rotations, for example, but that is really only to name a few. The research side is a lot wider. So this research focus and aligns with global needs regarding climate change and is also well aligned with the focus of this event. So for more information on the research side of our program, you're welcome to contact our researchers at Grain SA, and any questions regarding to the farmer development side, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Our last panelist who's standing between us and lunch, Bonani Nyodo from the National Agricultural Marketing Council, NAMAC.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure that I'm going to be sharing ideas with you. Very good to see the wine industry here. Actually, I was telling a couple of colleagues that we are only missing Salba and Service and Waza to have them all here. And interestingly, from the hosting institution, we do not have Professor Ndimba here. So when we do these things, perhaps we need to make sure that we do that. Maybe we need to apologize that he's not here. From the National Agriculture Marketing Council, is a creature of statute responsible for the advisory to the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, and stakeholders in the sector. Those are the objectives of the Act. Can we go to the next slide? I thought I should talk about South Africa's agriculture, and I want to say it's dynamic, slowly transforming. Why am I saying it's dynamic here? It's for a number of reasons. Biggest in the world, the produce we export, and we have sectors that have taken initiatives or work from research and acted accordingly, and you would see that some of these sectors are changing. You know, when I look at South Africa's agriculture, it's science in action. You have lots of science that comes out of the work of the industry being applied by those who make money from the industry, and government collects the taxes that it should collect, and the system runs as it should. So, and we have a couple of initiatives. We have CISA, we have WITA, we have in the wool industry responsible mohair, responsible wool standards, and you would realize that those have come out in addressing some of the challenges that some of the big NGOs have highlighted. And the industry, instead of sitting down and complaining, have put systems in place to address those challenges. We have confronting climate change. One of the industries that says, we know climate change is a problem. Perhaps we need to understand our value or supply chain and understand what's the contribution of each of the nodes in the carbon footprints and design ways of reducing the emissions. So I'm still wanting to argue that is extremely dynamic. And you have fruit fly, which is the quarantine pest, where the industry, in collaborations with the ARC and the department, have come up with Fruit Fly South Africa as a way of ensuring or providing assurance to the markets where we send our products that we are not exporting diseases, we're exporting food that is nutritious, extremely tasty. And all of this happened during the time of the transition from the system that was operating under the Marketing Act of 68 that provided for a single channel to a system we are having of an open system. And I want to argue, we may not be moving as fast as we want, but we are slowly transforming. I think the colleague from Grain SA, you missed out an important message I like from that industry. That says you have black farmers who are forming part of a premium class. You call this 2,000 ton club. You have black farmers in this country who are at that level because of the support of the industry in collaborations with government. And at times, when we talk about those, I don't know why success doesn't sell, but it's part of success. You get into an industry like the wool industry. The wool industry, I understand, internationally is not as big as the Australians, but in terms of providing the world with fine wool, the Australians know we are much stronger than them. They provide volumes, we provide fine. And if you get, so there is a lot of examples that will indicate how dynamic the industry is. And it is because of work of institutions like the ARC. It's not these compartments that we like. It's because the system, to some degree, works well. South Africa's industry is financed through two forms of finances, either than the membership-based funding that each of the producer organizations have. You have the inheritance from the control boards, the trusts. It's almost 3 billion rand now. And when I started working with them, it was around 2.3. And we also have statutory levies that are collected by industries, and most of those industries who are collecting these levies are those who may have received low assets from the control boards. It's these two sources of funds that are providing the industry with the lifeblood it requires. And the industries, in terms of their financing, have an obligation, and that's where I'm going now, have an obligation to play their role in ensuring that the historical injustices that led to the system we have, where we have black farmers who have operated at the periphery, gets addressed. And a number of these industries are starting to do initiatives that are getting these farmers into the mainstream. And I like capacity building. I like it. But I often argue, if you get into a family that has been keeping livestock for generations, and the first intervention you want to give them is training, and I often tell the colleagues that you may as well not assist them. You need to get to them, understand the reasoning why they are at the level where they are. It could be just an issue of the objective function, not necessarily the knowledge, but because you would come with the knowledge from the side of running a farming enterprise for commercial purposes. Then if that kind of training is the training you are offering, then that training to us makes sense. So the trusts provide the support in terms of what is written there. Can we move on? And it's 2 messages, and I'm going to save you time. And I'm about to end before you even stand up. 2 messages, dynamic. It's because there is science. The industry spends a great deal of money on research. And when that research is done by the people in the industry with the aim of improving the lives and livelihoods of those who are in the business, then we are happy. And that has to be done in a way that is friendly to the environment. And the industry colleagues know that consumers of our products, should we do these things that are funny, have a tendency of reminding us that our actions need to be in line. I've put, you know, English is second language, so I've put, I'm not sure there's an idiom or what, or proverb. There's a say in the Nguni languages here that a berry, that's a literal meaning. A berry doesn't get ripened because a monkey or a baboon is standing next to it, staring at it to get ripened. We need to be patient, we need to be systematic, but we need to do everything with the end goal in mind. Let me end there, and I'm sure I haven't wasted your time, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you once again for navigating within the time limits. We are a bit constrained in terms of time, attributable mainly to the load shedding break that we had. I had promised those that are participating virtually that I will prioritize them. This will be the first session whereby we prioritize those that are sitting comfortably at home. Okay, for the interest of time, I'm going to read a few comments and questions from that we got from virtual participants. This is a comment, I believe. For climate change information, the farmers should get such in the agricultural advisors, since more often disaster risk management units in each province do receive early warning notifications. So I believe that is a comment. There is a comment to Wendy. It is encouraging to see strategic partnerships between value chain role players yielding such successes stories. More partnerships like this goes a long way. Great work indeed. Now we go to questions. My brother, Beard, the first question goes to you. But for the interest of time, I'll read all the questions. Then I'll go around, you provide your concluding remark and also respond to your question. And I'll take only one question from the floor in doing that as well. Is the problem really capacity gaps, or it is just a challenge of adoption for either rational or irrational reasons? The last question is addressed to Digital Earth Africa. Are there plans to scale up to other countries? If so, what is required for a country to be part of this program? Can I have got one or two? Just two, maximum two from the floor. And then they'll respond. 1, 2. Okay.
Thanks, Program Director. Good afternoon, everyone. To the presenters, thanks for those insightful presentations. My questions are directed to the grain and wine industry and the first gentleman who was also a keynote speaker. Wendy and the Grain SA, we really appreciate the strides that you're making in the industry, but I fail to understand your pre and post support, particularly for the funding opportunities, because it looks like as the industry and as the farmers and as the DFIs, we don't have a common and clear interpretation of what is required. So are you able to, just at high level, just give an indication, what is your interpretation of pre and post support? And obviously, and this is informed by the need analysis that you've done in the sector as part of your development plan. And also from the grain and wine and the gentlemen as well, are there any climate, particularly from the farmers themselves, of smart adaptations lessons that we can take as an industry so that there could be a cross-pollination of creativity and innovation in that area? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. A very quick question for Dr. Moyo. The technologies you used in the TISA program transforming smallholder irrigation schemes, are they readily available on the market for farmers to be able to access? For example, your chameleon technology. Thanks.
There was a burning hand from, let me be fair. Okay. I saw your hand was raised quite. Yeah, right there. And that will be the last question.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you for our panelists for the very wonderful presentation. I have no question, but I want to just add some of my comments. This is Prof. Qin from UNISA, and also I'm chairperson of ACASA. ACASA is Association of China Africa Smallholder Agriculture. So we also do some collaboration and research about smallholder farmers in South Africa and in the whole Africa. But for this capacity gap, I think is very important because just now our colleagues they are mentioning about for this capacity building and the gaps is different between the commercial farmers and smallholder farmers, even between the farmers and two farmers, and also between the male farmers and female farmers. But I think for the climate change, we should use the 4IR technology, including IoT, AI, big data, robotics, and 3D printing to treat this climate change. There is a company is bought the agriculture technology to treat this. And also I want to see for the government, we should use the policy regulation and also I will do it very fast. And also fund to attract the smallholder farmers to do the pharmacy and also the agri-processing. For the SOE, for institution and NGO, we should do more collaboration and we should treat more training and the capacity building and so on to treat our smallholder farmers. I have many things I want to say, but time limitation.
Just one issue, and let's give others a chance, please.
No,
just summarize. Yeah, please. Yeah.
The question is for the panelists is how do you use the 4IR for this technology to benefit our smallholder farmers in the whole Africa? Thank you.
Thank you. For the interest of time, I think we only have got 1 minute 30 seconds each to conclude. Otherwise, we will be standing between lunch and the participants here. So I'll allow each one just to either respond or give concluding remarks. I don't think this mic is working.
Okay. Probably starting off with the question relating to the tools. I'll kindly direct you to the VIA booth that is by the cafeteria. The tools are readily available and you can get more information from the VIA booth that's down there. And then probably my concluding remark could be a challenge to all of us in the room, not just to the panelists, on what is it that we really contribute to the value chain. Are we adding value or are we taking value out of the chain? That's my challenge.
Thank you very much. Am I audible? From my side, there is no question, so I don't answer questions that are not asked. I realize when I look at the program that there is two colleagues from the industry who are still going to present, and Martin and Conrad. So I'm worried that you will present after I do, and maybe contradict some.
So I'm just going to address the questions that's been asked, the pre and post support. So I think where the transformation unit is positioned, we are ideally positioned to assist in pre-support. And on pre-support, what we do is that if an applicant or a beneficiary applies for funding via a commercial entity or a government institution, we have gone so far as to provide a technical report that, for example, addresses aspects like the farm that you want to buy, the land, in what state is it? Is it overvalued? And bring to the party that type of expertise. I mean, I think that in the past, some of the farmers has bought property at very high cost, of which the value of that property might not be aligned. So I think that is on the pre-support side. And then on the post-support side, what we do is also we come again in with viticultural and technical support. We also provide training and development. We have found with the farms that there's certain skills gaps. So we do a skills analysis or a need study, and then that farmer can get on the program and get all the support from either a development perspective, a technical perspective, a business perspective, even governance and ethics. In the wine industry, we also sit with various partnerships being formed, white farmers signing transactional agreements with black farmers or with the farm workers. And in that capacity, the post-support would be to act in the interest of the black partner in that transaction. So these various things that we do, and I'll give you a brochure because in the brochure it's all the detail. I just want to say once again, thank you. I think in moving forward with small farmer development, it's important that there's alignment. There's alignment with what industry sees transformation or the future is, and alignment with government and the institutions around that. But more importantly, fundamentally, is that where are the needs of the farmer? That should be the center of all our activities and all our support. I thank you.
Thank you. Since there was a question, I'm forced to answer. So online, I think, was really the question of capacity gaps, whether it is a problem of gaps or adoption. And I think that one thing I would say in closing, and that answers the question, is that all what we need in anything that we can do, one thing that will be absolutely critical in this sector is a change of mindset. Mindset change is going to be very critical. I'll give an example. Probably when many people will be surprised when I say crops don't need rain. Yes, indeed, crops don't need rain. They need water. What I mean by saying that is that oftentimes you would see farmers sitting next to a water stream and complaining that it's not raining. So that really means that we need to change that mindset. Let's not focus on the problems. Let's focus on the solutions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now, just quickly to answer on some of the questions posed. So to become part of our farmer development program, we have 7 offices throughout South Africa, farmer development offices, and around that study groups are formed. So the first point of entry would be through a study group, and then the farmer would progress from there, and then eventually being able to access training, information transfer, and then eventually, once the potential is there, to access loans. Then secondly, there was a question on smart adaptations that farmers do or are involved in or have come up with. A very good example of this is, for example, again, that is why I really tried to highlight the point of not generalizing. There's a group that existed or was initiated from this jobs fund that is situated in the Eastern Cape, where it's a whole group of farmers. They are totally connected with each other. They're on WhatsApp groups. They literally buy in bulk from the normal input suppliers. They get their deliveries. They are literally organizing themselves based on the knowledge that they gained through that initiative and through the partnerships built. So that is a very good example of the program working and farmers taking initiative and taking that one step further. And just to finalize, and the last comment from my side, I'd like to agree with what everyone said to date, and I think platforms such as this is absolutely crucial to get our minds around different mindsets, like you mentioned, to forge partnerships, to start thinking differently about things. We're not going to get different results if we keep doing the same thing that we're doing. That's all from us. I thank you.
Thanks for the question about how countries can become involved. So, of course, any country across Africa can be directly involved in the platform as a user online. So please jump onto our website and log in. In terms of the consultations, yes, they were originally in the 6 countries. There is interest in expanding that to further countries covered by AZARECA and CARDESA. So if the questioner is in one of those countries, they can express their desire to be involved via AZARECA or CARDESA. If they're outside those jurisdictions, please contact us, but please also contact your regional association for agricultural research and development and let them know what we've done with AZARECA and CARDESA, and hopefully we can expand and scale out into new countries as well. Finally, thanks to the panel, I've learned a great deal from this about capacity development across Africa. I'll be returning to Australia soon, and I'll warn my farming colleagues about the impending world domination of the South African wool industry. So, thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, my panelists and the audience, both physically and virtually. I'll just have got one sentence to conclude the session. In a nutshell, I think there was a convergence among the panelists that transformation of smallholder farmers is not an event, it's a process. But it's not just a process, it's a complex process which requires holistic approach, multidisciplinary approach, and multi-stakeholder approach. I think that there was convergence on that. There are success stories from different panelists and different stakeholders in terms of transforming smallholder farmers. I think the take-home message is that we need to leverage on these success stories and use them as best practices elsewhere. I also learned, lastly, a new proverb about baboons looking at at fruits. And given we are adjourning for lunch, by translation, the food will not be eaten by us just looking at them as well. Thank you very much, and we are breaking for lunch. We should be back at 2 o'clock, I believe. But thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah, very interesting.
Thank you so much. That was good.